Can you hear me?
Mike that he had an appointment that will last past the beginning of the meeting. He might be able to join us partway through. And then I just heard from August that he won't be able to make it. I have not heard from other members, so I will defer to you, Lance, but we can absolutely still go through the agenda and get the presentations. We just have to avoid the voting item, which would be the approval of the minutes.
All right, well, hear ye. We'll call this meeting to order. We need to read the beginning statement.
Good afternoon. My name is Jared Allen. I'm administrative technician at Lawrence Transit. With me here is Adam Weigel, transit and parking manager. He will work alongside Lance Fay to facilitate the meeting's proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, when you are not participating, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found in the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu. In some cases, we may mute or unmute people as needed to minimize distractions during the meeting. Please remember to state your name and title for the benefit of those listening remotely. If you are participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. And now I will do roll call. Lance Fay.
Here.
Austin Stifler.
Here.
Mike Wazakowski. Foster Spicinger. Alan Ackland.
Here.
Gregory Critchlow. Bill Wilson. August Rudisell. Freddie Gipp.
All right, so we're short of quorum, Lance, but we'll turn it back over to you. And
Okay, so we won't be able to do the agenda. It's a public comment. Is there any public comment in the room or in writing?
I don't have anything in writing. Don, did you want to say anything for public comment period?
I'll write it this moment.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, feel free to ask questions throughout the meeting for any content we have and work.
Okay, so no public comment, then we could move on to the agenda items. Electric bus progress phase 1.
Yes, so I have an update for you today about our first phase of electric bus deployment. We typically would have our consultant here, our project manager, CTE, who helps us do all the data analysis. Had some challenges with scheduling and they weren't able to be here, so I'll do my best with this technical presentation. If you've got follow-up questions, I will tell you everything I know to be true, and I'll commit to following up on things I don't quite know as well. So give me a second to share this presentation. Okay, Alan, can you see that all right on Zoom? Yes. All right,
Yep.
So step through this. Again, just framing all of our projects in the context of the strategic plan. A lot of the work we do, most of the work we do is in the connected city outcome area. So this gives a brief overview of what that area focuses on, including mobility. There are a number of different performance indicators that we try to impact with Connected City. And this particular project, electric bus project, there are two progress indicators in particular that we think can be improved by our electric bus project. One of them is the satisfaction level people have with transit. Just this technology, buses are a quieter ride, a more comfortable ride, as well as the percent of energy that the city uses being renewable. So obviously the higher percentage of electric vehicles that we have, the more renewable energy that we use as compared to non-renewables. Here's some of the description I just tried to give about exactly how we think this project ties in with those two progress indicators. This, again, is the overall work plan that we have this year and all the different projects we're working on. I just highlighted, in this case, it's just the one project that you see highlighted here, our phase 1 monitoring and evaluation. So the next several slides are from Center for Transportation and the Environment, CTE, who is helping us. They help us through all the procurement process, kind of planning on how we deploy all this infrastructure and vehicles. And they also help us with evaluation. So they're looking at a lot of the back-end data, helping bring it into more digestible charts and graphs and helping us understand what our operations are looking like and affecting some of the decisions we make. So I'll go relatively briefly through their slides about who they are. So just generally, they work across the country. They are a nonprofit organization focused on electrification of transit. As a reminder, they're working with us on 3 distinct projects. These are the 3 low-no grants that we have won in a row from FTA, and they'll be helping us through procurement, deployment, and evaluation of all of these. So today we'll talk about phase 1, which are the 5 Gillig buses we have to treat today. We have 2 additional Gillig buses that will show up. We were planning on later this year. It may be early 2024. And then our 3rd phase has a couple of Proterra 40-foot electric buses, as well as a couple of cutaways. And those will be probably in mid-2024. So looking at some of the data, there are a lot of different data points that CTE helps us look at. We are going to look at just a subset of those. The 5 that are bold at the top here is what we'll look at some charts and graphs for. But they walk us through, as an internal staff, monthly. We have about an hour or 90 minutes. How we prior month, and are there any changes we should be making? So to start, let's see if I can get this to hide. Our daily state of charge used by bus. So we've got a few different things out in these vertical bars. You see the different months of deployment across the bottom. So September of 22 was our first full month of operation, and we have data through February that we're able to show now. We don't have the March data loaded in here yet. The general idea of this graph is our goal and hope to use as much of our available state of charge every day as we can. We send out a bus, we want to use as much of that battery power as possible before we bring it back to the shop. We have been pretty conservative early on in our deployment, just making sure that we have plenty of wiggle room for buses to come back with state of charge, able to look at our back-end data. The more solid green bars are what you can see is the state of charge we actually used on average every day in those months. So most of the time we have been bringing buses back with about 45% battery still remaining. Now we'd like to push that farther down in future months. We have what you see in this 15% all the way across is what we call our head home zone. That's about the time when we have about 15% charge left that we want to start bringing those buses back to the shop to give them plenty of miles to make it back without concern of needing to be towed or anything to that regard. Operationally, what this looks like is most of the time our buses are out until the drivers switch out at about midday. So buses are out from about 5 in the morning until about 12:30 or 1 p.m. And that first half of the day, driver takes his or her electric bus back to the garage, and the afternoon driver will bring out their their fully charged electric bus to run the last half of the day. So in doing that, we're leaving a lot of electric charge unused. So you will see in future months us trying to push this farther, trying to more consistently be using 65, 70% of the stated charge. We'll push it to 80, and we'll try to get closer to that head home zone in future months. We take special interest in seeing how our buses are moving through transportation disadvantaged zones. So we want to make sure we're using electric vehicles and vehicles with lower emissions equitably across the city, and not running them in places of primarily higher income levels or primarily lower numbers of people of color. So this is one of our measures that just takes a look at how we're running the vehicles in more transportation disadvantaged zones of our city, which takes into account things like income, race, people who have less vehicles in their household, single parent households, things like that. There's a lot of factors that contribute to people who may have a more difficult time with transportation. So in February, we ran electric buses primarily on routes 1 and 6. Route 1 has a pretty high percentage of its route that's in a transportation disadvantage zone, about 72%. Route 6 is about 38% in transportation disadvantage zones. So on this next chart, we'll look down at the year to date and this column over here that shows essentially the miles that our electric buses are spending in transportation disadvantaged zones. What percentage of those miles are in more disadvantaged areas of the city? So again, this is a number we'd like to keep pushing higher if we can. I'd like to be thoughtful about our deployment. And so we'll look in future months about what routes we can have our buses operate on that take advantage of this. We also look at our fuel cost per mile, comparing our electric fleet to our diesel fleet and gasoline fleet. So the larger vehicles that are out on the street are diesel. The cutaways that you see, the shorter buses that are out there, are all gasoline. So this is looking at both preventative maintenance as well as unscheduled maintenance coming into the shop, and how much money we spend on these different types of vehicles, how that's looking. And so far we're seeing, I guess this is in February, but you can see from September all the way to February, a much lower cost to maintain our electric fleet compared to our other fleets. There are certainly a lot less fluids, a lot less moving parts in the electric vehicles. So this is showing that in February, it costs us about half as much to operate a electric vehicle per day than a diesel when it comes to fuel. I guess let me clarify. I'd spoken a lot about bringing buses into the shop. This particular slide is a lot about the fuel itself. So the cost of our electricity going into an electric bus versus the cost of the diesel and the cost of the gas that we have to run the gasoline powered vehicles. This next slide gets more at what I was just talking about, which is the maintenance cost. So those preventative maintenance costs, those unscheduled maintenance, you see electric performing pretty well and staying pretty low, especially in February, compared to maintenance that we had to do on our other fuel types of vehicles. This slide aims to kind of capture what we're doing with emission savings in more digestible terms, comparing it to different touch points that a regular person may be familiar with. So our electric buses have traveled a little over 52,000 miles. That has saved about 9,500 gallons of diesel. If we were to have run those same miles with diesel buses, prevented 49 metric tons of CO2 being in the atmosphere, and comparing that to about 121,000 miles of passenger car travel. So just some touch points to communicate impact our emission savings is having so far, and these numbers will continue to grow as we keep our buses on the street. That's the content I have for the update for our first phase of electric buses. Happy to take any questions or thoughts from members of ptac or members of the audience, anybody who has questions or thoughts on this.
Al Ackland, ptac member. On the cost per mile, I mean, the mile, those are interesting figures, but the gasoline and diesel buses, are they traveling longer distances over the same period of time versus the electric?
So,
like a maintenance issue, if you're traveling half the distance, as the alternate mode of transportation, then that might have a skew the maintenance cost somewhat. If you're not, the cost per mile is easy to configure, but if you're driving half the miles to start with, there might be somewhat skewing of the data.
Yes, and this data hasn't been normalized for distance by vehicle. It's been normalized by a per vehicle basis. But you're correct that that we do have these vehicles, like I said, they're out for 8 or 10 hours a day as opposed to 14. So we will try to be pushing that more, like I said, to keep that usage higher, and absolutely we'll be interested to see how that would impact these kind of maintenance and fuel numbers for sure.
Lance Fay, ptac Vice Chair. We've run the couple of other routes with the electric buses, right? I think the 10 has run a couple times. Am I correct?
Yes.
And is there any data different on that, as you notice? And is that brought in here at all?
So yes, it's not in the slides that we've shown you today. We have been looking at like efficiency performance across different routes. So we've run electrics on significant distance on routes 1, 6, 10 have been the primary routes we've been running electrics on. So we haven't seen a huge discrepancy in efficiency or how many miles the bus can run on those particular routes. Route 10 does have a lot more topography, which is interesting not to see as much change in efficiency. But yeah, we're certainly tracking that. There also can be differences by driver and how different drivers apply and don't apply regenerative braking and different things. So that's another angle that we're trying to look at, and have not seen large differences. We also looked at very cold days versus more temperate days, and again, haven't yet seen a lot of differences in that. We do have, like we've told this group before, auxiliary diesel heaters that help heat the cabin on very cold days. So we're not drawing off the electric batteries for that. But there's kind of a lot of different angles we're looking at to try to understand how efficiency might change under different conditions. Let's see, Austin, go ahead and jump in.
Hello, Austin Stifler, ptac member here. I know you all mentioned that we're sort of trying to utilize more and more of that battery capacity. I was wondering what that time frame looks like for maybe trying to reach that maximal 80%, 75, 80% battery capacity usage per diem.
Yeah, so we've talked with our operators at First Transit about pushing that first bus that's out every day until closer to 5 or 6 p.m. as opposed to around 1 p.m. And there's agreement around the table that we feel like that's will still bring us back to the shop with a safe amount of battery remaining. And we do get warnings on the dashboard for low battery at 20% that give us time to react. But hopefully as early as the April report. So that report should start showing that daily SOC used coming a lot closer to what we're aiming for.
Great. Thanks.
Any other thoughts, Lance?
Well, we can't do an action item. So is that time to move on to the next item here? Okay. So the next agenda item would be, let's see, free draft report.
All right. So we attached a report to the agenda tonight. I'll pull it up and I'll skip to a couple of sections. So when we talked about Fair Free pilot program through this group, we committed to doing quarterly reports to try to measure the impact in a lot of different ways. And this draft report is our attempt to do that. So we are waiting on some additional March data. And if you looked at the agenda item, you'll notice that there's some comments still in the document and it's got the draft watermark all over it. So we're not complete on this yet. We also are working closely with an urban planning program at KU. Some students are helping us do some survey outreach this month that will help fill in some of the gaps about any changes in rider behavior as it relates to Fair Free. So we still got some work to do to get a finalized report for the first quarter, looking essentially at January, February, and March. And we hope to have that finished up this month sometime. But even though we're not fully tightened up on this report, we thought we'd still bring the draft to you all and talk through at least the components of it so that you can see what's in here and ask any questions. This will be something that we'll post up on the project website every time we have a quarterly report completed. We are looking still at the third quarter of this year. Is after that quarterly report is when we'll really make our decision about ability to continue the program. We'll better understand the impact on everything as we get deeper into this calendar year. So with that, I'll bring up the report and get into that. So I'll be doing some scrolling, so apologies for emotion sickness. We have, we tie it to the strategic plan here at the beginning, just some of the performance indicators again that we believe will be impacted by the Fair Free program. People's satisfaction with transit, our reliability goals as it relates to how fast buses can move without pausing for fares. The cost per passenger trip is really a function of our operational costs are relatively constant with a couple of exceptions. So the more we can drive up ridership, the lower our cost per passenger is. And then our percent of trips not taken in automobile. So are we encouraging new riders to join the system instead of sometimes driving, or they taking the bus instead? So we walk through each of the impact areas that we talked about when we were leading into the pilot program. So the first one is perhaps the most obvious, which is ridership. We're looking at this based on each route. I brought some information the last time we spoke about how the routes were looking. At that time, we just had January data. Now we have January, February. We actually just got March data a day or two ago, so we'll get that incorporated into these charts and graphs. There aren't any significant shifts to what we shared with this group before. We still have about 4 routes that are exceeding pre-pandemic ridership. We expect to see a few others creep above that probably in the next couple of months, just given what we've seen in these first couple of months. And then there's a couple others that are still struggling a little bit with ridership, and we may have to do some additional analysis to understand some of the reasoning behind that. Numbers, so we haven't climbed above pre-pandemic numbers. I guess that's with me not seeing the March data yet. But you can see it climbing from January to February. So we'll see how that tracks as we move into future months. I will skip to routes, some of the routes that are doing quite well. So Route 4 is one that wasn't quite there in January, but by February, now Route 4 is exceeding all pre-pandemic ridership numbers. Route 5 is one of these that we need to do some deeper analysis. It's had quite low ridership the last few years and has really not come back close to pre-pandemic. So we talked internally about potentially some of the longer term construction that's been happening on 23rd Street. Do we think that's had an impact potentially on people finding different modes of transportation? But that one will require some deeper analysis. Routes 6 and 7 are two routes that are doing quite well as compared to prior years. That it looks like fare free is having an impact on. So you see 6 there quite high. You see Route 7 really exceeding what we've seen in prior years. Route 9 is one of those middle of the road routes that's gotten back to above 2020 or right about at 2020 ridership, but not quite at 2019. So we'll see how that one's looking come March. Route 10 is doing quite well. You'll see 10, 11, and 12, and Margaretta alluded to this in the last meeting, that all 3 of those routes are affected by the KU semester periods, and you'll see dips when it comes to summer and winter months predictably on those routes because of where they travel. So that's one of the patterns you see here across all years with Route 10. Route 11 and 12, you'll see just one data point on each of those. We're doing some additional work to separate out 11 and 12 ridership. So those will come back into focus by the time we finish this quarterly report sometime this month. 15 is one of the middle of the road type routes, exceeding the last couple of years, but still looking towards getting back up to pre-pandemic. And 27 also kind of middle of the road. I know Haskell's on-campus students have been a lot lower since the pandemic. They're still coming back, so that may have had an impact on some of our 27 ridership as well. A different way to look at ridership, just included a chart that has year-to-date percentage change as it compares to 2019. Right now, this is just January, February ridership, but really anything that exceeds 100% of 2019 is going to be those routes that are really exceeding that pre-pandemic. And you'll see the ones like routes 1 and 3 that are approaching 100%. We're approaching that pre-pandemic ridership levels and haven't quite gotten there yet. And like I mentioned, we're still don't quite have all the data we need for a couple of these routes. So this chart will come a little more into focus as we pull all those numbers together for this final report. We are looking at on-time performance. This is an area that we don't yet have our charts in order. See if I have anything here yet. Got some of that data. So we're looking at, what's on-time performance look like by route, as well as overall. This is only January and February data, so I don't have March in here yet. But anytime that green bar exceeds the yellow bar is a good thing for us. We're seeing buses that are on time more often in 2023 than they were in 2022. And that can at least partially be attributed to buses not having to slow down for people to pull paper fares out of their pocket, pull change out of their pocket, pull up a digital bus fare on their phone. So we anticipated some of our routes would be helped with this metric, as the drivers didn't have to be concerned about managing fares. Equity, we have some work to do with surveying to understand ridership patterns when it comes to people who are low income in our community. Are people riding their same routes more often? Are they riding to different places across town now that they don't have to pay for bus fare? We're evaluating that through survey work that is taking place this month. Staff time. So we're already reaping the benefits of this as far as our staff, the variety of different activities related to fairs that we just no longer have to do. So we coordinated with armored car service. We designed, printed, distributed paper passes to grocery stores, to the community shelter, lots of customer service function related to people reaching out with concerns or questions about passes. There are processes through our financial system that have to be done when we're collecting fares that we don't do today. And so I've just kind of reiterated some of the annual time and cost savings that we anticipate here. I just see this note from Margareta. Did you want to speak about any of this, Margareta?
No, I just noticed that the only routes that are not having better on-time performance have a pretty significant impact from the 23rd Street construction. And so that might be worth noting on that page when you do your final report, because it might look like those routes aren't having any better performance, but they also have this huge other reason not to.
Right.
Just a random thought I had while you were scrolling through there.
Yeah, good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Again, through survey data, we hope to understand some questions about rider economics. One of the benefits of Fare Free is that people in our community now no longer have probably between about $400 and $1,000 a year that people might be spending on transit passes. So understanding more about what how people are saving or using that money in our community will be part of the survey work that urban planning students are helping with. Impacts to our service capacity and our budget. So this is really one of the critical areas when it comes to us deciding about feasibility of extending Fare Free. So the amount of hours we have on the street for fixed route are relatively fixed. We don't anticipate adding new frequency to bus routes in the middle of the budget year, for example. If we had routes that regularly saw completely packed buses, we were leaving people behind at bus stops, we would have to consider that. I think we still are remaining pretty comfortable with the capacity we have in our vehicles on the street to accommodate increases in fixed route ridership. But we do have a couple areas of our service that are demand response, and our revenue hours have to rise to meet that level of demand. So paratransit, T-Lift is one of those areas, and Nightline, our overnight service that primarily serves third shift workers, is another area. So we are tracking the usage of those in a few different ways that we haven't yet pulled the charts together for. We'll be looking at our total active users for T-Lift and for Nightline to see if that number is growing. We'll, of course, be looking just at ridership in both of those areas. We'll be able to keep riders anonymous, but understand if at the rider level, are they accessing these services more frequently or more often because they are free? So do we have T-Lift or Nightline riders who used to ride, let's say, 4 times a month, and now they ride 8 or 10 times a month because there's no cost to the service? So those are some of the areas where we'll be looking at very closely to understand impacts on how much service we have to put out on the street, and if we can afford that continued service. There's also a section, again, that staff will get out and talk directly with riders and drivers about their experience to capture any qualitative pieces of the puzzle that we haven't quite captured in the data. So just trying to understand on a human level when we talk with people riding the bus, when we talk with drivers, to give us feedback on their view and understanding of fare free service and how it's impacting them. So we'll see if we learn any kind of outside the box things from that engagement. I believe that's all the content I have. So happy to scroll back to anything or answer any questions about this. Apologies that you're looking at a very draft report, but we wanted to present something to you today, knowing that we would really tighten it up later this month. But thought that you being able to at least see how it was laid out and some of the data we've already got in here would be helpful to this group or the public. Happy to answer any questions.
Lance Fay, Vice Chair, I will mention that 23rd Street construction would also be affecting Route 1. There's also been some other reroutes that may have had some impact. I am noticing an increase in ridership just as a regular rider of that route. So I think we may see that change.
Yes, that 23rd Street corridor project is such a impactful one that it will be difficult for us to really zero in on some things just due to that. We'll just have to know that that's kind of a factor in everything we're looking at.
I think also that the homeless shelter is also still at reduced capacity from the pandemic, and so there's a lower number of consumers that those services riding the bus right now than there were, say, in 2019.
Any other thoughts or questions from the group? Yeah. Like I said, well, once we finish this up, you'll see it go public on the website. We'll put out a news release that says it's now available because we do want to point people towards it who are curious or interested in different parts of our community. But it's coming together here. I think we're good to move on when you are, Lance.
Okay, so any future agenda or work items that we need to, or other items that need to be presented?
This is for ptac members. Austin or Alan, anything from you all?
I'll act on ptac. Nope, I don't have anything.
Austin, PTAC member, nothing here.
Just reiterate what Mike Watzkowski always does. If you have topics you're interested in us talking about, please send those to me, Mike and Lance via email, and we'll get those programmed for a future meeting.
Okay, any transit staff items?
So I do have a few. Yeah, I've got a few staff items I wanted to bring up. So just wanted to keep you all in the loop. You know, things are moving pretty well on Central Station. So I threw together a couple of quick slides just because visuals are more interesting than me talking, though you'll have to deal with me talking as well, or at least be pictures along with that. Okay. So I just wanted to bring in a couple of recent photos. So our Fred Decker is our project manager through MSO that is doing a lot more site visits than I'm able to do. And is just keeping us updated with photos when he's out there. So these couple of photos are from the 5th, so just last week. And photo on the left is inside the building. A lot of the plumbing work, underground, under slab plumbing work is being done. So they're saw cutting a lot of the concrete and getting plumbing fixtures in there. The platform area is really starting to flatten out. If you haven't driven over in the area, they've really brought that hill quite flat, and you see a lot of the earthwork on the 5th. It's there. This is from the 7th, so just a couple days later. That area was pretty torn up with all the plumbing. Now you see we're covering that back up with gravel after inspection. We'll get that all filled in with concrete at some point. So contractors both working within the building and outside the building at the same time and keeping things moving. We had our biweekly update today and just wanted to share a couple of notable items from that. So of course, weather can change some of these things, but at least on the immediate forecast, things look pretty good. Contractor expects to have the majority of that site grading complete by the end of this week. So that whole platform area, everything west of the building should be getting very close to being ready for pavement. So shortly after the grading is done, there will be footings. So the larger underground concrete footings. We have some areas near the building. We have some footings that will support an awning canopy very close to the entrance of the building around the west and the south sides. And then also some large footings out on the canopy or near the platform canopies that will support the large columns, steel beams that will support that canopy. So that work is upcoming shortly after that site grading is done. And then more notable paving shortly after that within the next couple of weeks. So we're getting very close to some pretty visible changes out there on the hill. And we'll, of course, be sharing that on our project page that we have on our website, but we'll be updating this group as well. The other bullet I have on here is about structural steel. So inside the building itself, framing out all the rooms and the other support columns that will get added in. A lot of that will start happening in the next week or so. So just wanted to keep you all in the loop as it relates to Central Station. Before I hop to the next topic, any questions or thoughts on this big project?
What is at this time, what is the projected completion date for that?
Yeah, thanks, Don. So we're still aiming to be operational by August 1st when we do our normal route changes. Now, what that means is all the platform area paving will all be complete. Buses will be able to safely move off and on the platform. The building may still be under construction. So some of those amenities inside the building, the contractor has until late September, early October for that to be completely finished. So far, some of this depends on supply chain and how things come together a little later in the summer. Contractor has some confidence they'll be able to beat that late September, early October timeframe for the building, but we'll start to gain more confidence about exact dates for everything to be done. Probably as we get into June, July, I think things will really start to become obvious. Any other thoughts from those on Zoom about Central Station before I move on here?
Well, thanks, Adam. Looks great. I'm glad that we're making good progress on the building and the site overall.
Yes, very much so. Welcome to the meeting, Mike.
Thank you. My wife is doing very well.
All right, good to hear. Good to hear. Okay, so a few other things I wanted to update the group on. We have a handful of community partner projects that we've been working through as a staff, and you may have seen some of this on social media and news releases that we've been putting out, but just wanted to bring them before this group as well. So Felice Laverne on our team has done the work really on all three of these projects, had worked directly with the self-engineering students. Again, we worked with them last year on a bench project. This year, a different group of students helped us on a sound dampening project on cutaways. We have our cutaway vehicles, especially with the lift mechanisms, can be a little bit louder when we're bouncing over potholes and things. So they worked with us on a project to figure out how to make it a little quieter for riders and the driver inside the bus. We worked with the Lawrence Fruit Tree Project to plant some fruit trees at a handful of bus stops recently, and have also been working with the Indigenous Community Center and a number of Indigenous artists in Lawrence to put up new bus shelter art. So just wanted to provide some updates on those. I will briefly point you to a couple of things online. So on our website, we have news pages. And so we have a page, a news story about our partnership with the SELF program, photo of us out with some of our First Transit partners, Renee and Eric out there helping with that lift mechanism, and some more details about that, a link to the final report from the students and kind of how they walked through the process and worked through the cost of materials and different things to do some of that sound dampening. So would encourage you to go check that out on the website. Mention the fruit tree project. If you're an appreciator of puns, you'll appreciate the headline. But we worked with our partners, put out fruit trees at a handful of, or 3 bus stops, a couple different stops on Haskell, stop over by the hospital. And so just had a great time working with our partners there on that project these last couple of weeks. And then we are still in the process of getting 10 shelters outfitted with Indigenous artwork. So we don't have a full document that has artist stories and a news release out just yet. But I did want to point you to Mona Cliff is one of those artists, and she helped us with a piece of art on a bus shelter near Haskell and 23rd. So this is a sneak preview of some of that artwork. Vinyl work applied to the glass shelter that we have there. And this is amazing artwork. We've got 10 other shelters that also have really, really amazing artwork as well. So excited to roll that out. Probably in the next month or so is when we'll be able to get everything outfitted. We'll have our story come out, and would encourage you to follow the links to read all about the artist stories and what these different pieces of artwork mean, because there's a lot of meaning behind a lot of this artwork that'll come out. So I'm just proud and excited for the work that staff's done in those areas, and wanted to share that with you all. That's all we have for our transit staff updates.
Okay, thanks, Adam. I believe that was actually the last item on the agenda. So unless there are other items that other ptac members on the call want to bring up. Hearing nothing, as you can see on screen, our next meeting is going to be scheduled for May 8th. I hope that I will be in attendance for that, but we're getting pretty close to my wife's due date. So who knows what will actually happen. She's due May 20th, but anything can happen. As soon as she comes, I'm going to go on paternity leave, and I will expect to be back after I'm back on paternity leave for that.
Well, future congrats to you about that, Mike. Everything goes well. And
Yep, me too. Anyway, thank you very much for being here today, committee members and everybody else. Appreciate your time and effort on this, and we'll see you in about 4 weeks.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.